right, how do I start this? Just... Oh no. 3, 2, 1. Hey. So at any moment in time, an infinite continuum of public policy problems exists across the United States, many of which fly quietly under the public radar. The large focusing events can thrust these issues into the public spotlight, triggering a crisis of confidence in government institutions themselves. The manner in which governments respond to these problems can help rebuild public trust or degrade it. What do these events look like? Well, they look like the Russian interference in the 2016 election, which exposed vulnerabilities in US cybersecurity and weaknesses in electoral safeguards. These failures eroded public confidence in government institutions and challenged electoral outcomes themselves, in the mind of the public at least. They also look like things like the opioid epidemic, a failure that exposed the medical's role in overpricing and oversupplying opiates, systemic failures in regulation, and insufficient addiction treatment centers for hurt Americans across the US. These shortcomings also led to widespread distrust in the medical industry as well as the public healthcare system as a whole. They can even look like natural disasters, things that are kind of sometimes out of our control. Things like Hurricane Katrina, which revealed significant gaps in the coordinative capacity of government agencies, failures in FEMA's disaster response program, and also systemic inequities in our emergency preparedness. These shortcomings highlighted the fragility of our disaster management systems, which continues to be highlighted almost daily now. Finally, and most salient to this presentation, failures look like the salient killings of the high-profile killings of Black Americans across the United States, events that expose systemic biases in policing and the lack of accountability mechanisms available to us to hold police departments and officers accountable. These events catalyzed over 11,000 protests across the US. In an effort to satisfy these demands for change, policymakers introduced more than 4,500 local, federal, and state policies. These proposals varied wildly, reflecting both the urgency of the moment and the challenges associated with designing effective, evidence-based reform. What does policing reform look like? Well, some of these proposals aimed to enhance police accountability, often through the introduction of things like body-worn cameras and the creation of community oversight boards. The logic is pretty simple. When cops know they're being watched, they are more likely to act in the public interest, and when they do so, people like them, and it builds confidence and trust over time. Other reforms sought to reshape how officers are perceived by the public by changing how they look and how we see them as a whole. So this might restrict things like the use of military hardware, including these nice little MRAPs here, as well as diversifying police forces themselves. The logic is, when they look nice and when they look like us, we believe they act in our interest, which makes us trust them more over time. The challenge, however, is that many of these 4,500 proposed reforms are either completely unproven or have been proven ineffective. Even well-studied and often celebrated interventions like body-worn cameras have yielded mixed, very, very context-dependent results. Policymaking requires nuance. Context matters, and solutions must align with local needs and conditions. This realization led me and my research team to consider a different approach. Instead of looking for that magical bullet to solve all of policing, let's try to fix the policing policymaking process itself. So turning to scholars like Eleanor Ostrom, we explored whether involving communities in the co-production of policing policies could yield better context-sensitive outcomes. To explore this, we turned to Cincinnati, a city with a really unique approach to collaborative policing called the Collaborative Bargaining Agreement, or CBA. The CBA was created in response to 2001 Cincinnati riots and was seen as a way of enhancing trust. While initially this was court-mandated, it remains voluntarily in effect today. The CBA works by compelling police departments to consult with and co-produce with civil society organizations that are present, such as the Black United Front of Cincinnati, when developing policies and programs. These groups, which have had a super shaky history historically, now are seen as co-producers and co-collaborators and sort of like frenemies. The CBA has resulted in a myriad of innovative policies designed to promote community trust and safety, promote officer accountability, and promote citizen trust. It's led to lower arrest rates, so not arresting for low-level crimes, more meaningful contact-oriented solutions leading to reduced infringements on civil rights, and in turn, fewer instances of police violence. While policies have been deemed effective in both solving these issues and reducing crime, less is known about whether it's actually promoted trust. So we actually produced the first study on this year in Policy Studies Journal, trying to link how citizen knowledge about the intricacies of the collaborative agreement affects the way that they interact with police in the street. We found that the CBA had a transformative effect. So we can look at the graph here, and we found that when citizens know nothing or have never heard about the collaborative agreement, they have about a 1% chance of saying that they feel really comfortable interacting with the police when they're stopped. This changes to about 80% when they know all about the intricacies of the collaborative agreement. So while this is super intriguing, we got to thinking, is this, just like weird cinnamon chili served over spaghetti, something that only flies in Cincinnati, right? Right? Or is this a viable way forward for other cities? Like, is this generalizable, right? So to answer this, we conducted a nationwide study using a conjoint experiment. Won't talk about that. We tested how various features of a hypothetical police department, including whether or not they co-produce policies with citizens, affects the way that they would view the police in terms of accountability and trust. The results are again clear. Collaboration matters. Outside of the factors that were directly related to department performance, like how many use of force complaints they have and whether they're actually effective in solving crime, it is the only process-based element that we found to have any significant effect that is generalizable across across the state. So what does this all mean? It means that community-driven solutions don't produce better tailored policies, they build trust, and trust is super critical. Studies consistently show that when citizens trust police, they're less likely to get violently attacked or violently engage with those police. This means that just by virtue of collaborating, we might promote safer communities and promote safety for the officers that are, regulating those communities. Finally, we think that co-producing policies is just a great way to combat democratic deficits associated with policing and bureaucracies more generally. By turning the community from passive and often unwilling consumers to co-producers of policing policies and services, we might be able to create more accountable, inclusive institutions. By the way, this is what ChatGPT thinks democracy is, which is terrifying. Thank you.